Hi and welcome to my channel. So this video is going to be about the BRCA gene mutation, which I will explain in more detail in a minute. But just to recap, for those of you that might be new to my channel or don't know what my cancer journey story, I have just completed chemotherapy. I am about to have quite radical double mastectomy and reconstruction next week, followed up with radiotherapy. So I have had quite an aggressive treatment plan, simply because I was diagnosed with stage 3B triple negative breast cancer, which is an aggressive cancer. My family story extends a bit further. So my mum was diagnosed 4 years ago with the same cancer, triple negative, at the age of 58. She is, touch wood, 4 years clear, and her mother was diagnosed at 34 and died at 42, which was back in the 60s, but clearly there was a bit of a family link. So when my mum was diagnosed 4 years ago, I'm one of 3 girls, and we all went to our doctors and kind of requested genetic testing. So you may or may not be aware of some of the causes of cancer. So there's some of the obvious ones like lifestyle choices, obesity, smoking, I don't know, all sorts of things. But there is, unfortunately, for poor buggers like me and my family, genetic mutations that can be responsible for causing cancer. So we knew this when my mum was diagnosed, and we requested genetic testing. Unfortunately, we were, as a family, turned down because there wasn't enough clear evidence, which is a shame really, because if we hadn't been turned down, then I might not be in the sad, bald position that I am now. But hey ho, everything happens for a reason. So when I was diagnosed back in August, they suggested that it might be down to a genetic link, but they weren't sure. So that's why I had to have what's known as neo-adjuvant chemotherapy. So I had my chemotherapy first, and then surgery second, whereas the usual way of doing it is to have surgery first and then chemotherapy to kill off all the residual cancer cells. So I decided, because I was waiting for my genetic testing and I didn't want to have 2 surgeries, so what they were suggesting was I have a lumpectomy to start with, followed with chemotherapy, and then if I had the breast cancer gene, then I might be offered a further radical double mastectomy with reconstruction. So I didn't really want to have 2 surgeries. So I chose to have chemotherapy first and then surgeries. And sadly for my family, I tested positive for BRCA1. So kind of has huge implications really, and let me just explain it a little bit more. So everybody has, male or female, has a gene that has been labelled as BRCA1 and BRCA2. So there's 2 genes, which stands for breast cancer 1, breast cancer 2. Okay. Some people, and unfortunately it's only 1 in 800 people, so I'm one of the very unlucky few, has a mutation on their breast cancer gene. So what happens is, in a normal person, the breast cancer, so BRCA1 or BRCA2, you have, when your cells are splitting, sometimes there are abnormal cells that are split when you're creating new cells. This is kind of my understanding of it, I'm hoping it's right. And sometimes cells divide and they don't replicate completely the parent cell. So they'll create kind of an abnormal cell. Then that cell splits, then that cell splits and splits, and then that cell splits, splits. So that's how cancer's created, is these abnormal cells that then divide themselves and keep dividing. So in a normal person, your breast cancer gene then, I think this is my understanding, corrects the abnormal cell, and that's the end of it. So that cancer doesn't like keep splitting. Okay. So breast cancer 1, so BRCA1 doesn't work properly. So I've got a genetic mutation on it. So it doesn't attack the cancer cells when they're made. So the cancer cells are allowed, it starts and then it keeps going. If you test positive for BRCA1, it gives you a lifetime risk of breast cancer at 85%, which is ridiculously high. You've also got a lifetime risk of ovarian cancer, and they put that figure between 40 and 60% chance of getting that. BRCA2, it's slightly less. I'm not entirely sure about statistics, but I think it's a 40 to 60% chance of breast cancer and 20 to 30% chance of ovarian cancer. So still in the very, very high risk category for cancer. So this wasn't really a good thing to be testing positive for. We knew that because I was positive, that my mum was positive, or it was going to be very unlikely that she was negative. These mutations, genetic mutations, are inherited from a parent, so it had to be one of my two parents, and seeing as my mum was the one that had breast cancer and her mum had breast cancer, it was looking at 99.9% chance of her having a positive BRCA1. If my dad could have had it as well, but he hasn't been tested, but because there's no cancer in his family, it's very, very unlikely that my dad is a carrier. So that then gives my sisters, so I'm one of 3 girls, it gives my sisters a 50-50 chance of having the BRCA1 mutation. Sadly, my baby sister has tested positive, so that's 2 out of 3 of us. And my middle sister is about to be tested. She was pregnant at the time, and so now that she's not pregnant, they're going to test her, so she has a 50-50 chance. So it's kind of quite far-reaching. They have slightly different treatment plan to me. The options that we've got now are either to be monitored closely, scanned, or to have risk-reducing surgeries. So the scans involve things like mammograms, yearly mammograms, to check for tumours, and ultrasounds to check for ovarian cancer, and also yearly blood tests, 6-monthly blood tests to check for cancer markers, so they can see there's, if you have got an elevated CA125 level, this means that you could have some sort of cancer going on around your body, so they will be checking for that. Sadly, the scans and the close monitoring is not particularly reliable, and the downside of that is if you develop cancer, then obviously you've got to deal with that, whereas if you take it away, then you're just doing that surgery and that's it. Hopefully you move on. My biggest worry is that for my sisters, I had a mammogram and my cancer didn't show up on the mammogram. So, young women have quite dense breast tissue, so mammograms aren't particularly reliable, and actually my cancer didn't show up. It only showed up on an ultrasound. That was the only way that they found it, so that was quite lucky that I found the dent that I did, and that they could deal with it and they knew what they were looking for, but it didn't show up on a mammogram. So my concern would be yearly mammograms are not really that reliable. And also with the ovarian scans, it's been proven that the scans, the ultrasounds, don't show up ovarian cancer because they're so small anyway until it's at a much more advanced stage. So that's a massive downside, really. So that's the one option, to be closely monitored. The other option you've got is your risk-reducing surgeries. So the 2 risk-reducing surgeries you'd be looking at are double mastectomy, and what's known as oophorectomy. So double mastectomy is removal of all the breast tissue, and an oophorectomy is removal of all the ovaries and also fallopian tubes. So the risk reducing surgeries, double mastectomy and reconstruction. So that's the surgery that I am opting for in a week's time, and what they will do is they will cut underneath my breasts, take out all the tissue, which means nerves, tissue, fat, and basically leave just skin, which I know sounds pretty disgusting, but this is the reality of what I'm having to do just to stay alive. And they will put an implant in, which is great, and it's actually, mine's quite a pioneering surgery. It's called a skin sparing, nipple sparing double mastectomy, and it's a new thing that they're doing. The downside is that I'm going to have no feeling from here down to here. Feeling in my armpit is all going, so I'll be pretty numb, but it was a small price to pay for reducing my lifetime risk from 85% down to 5%. So the average woman has a breast cancer risk rate of 12%, so actually my rate of getting breast cancer again is much lower than the national average. So for me it was a bit of a no-brainer, because it means that I can move on with my life and not have to worry about getting another cancer. I did ask my doctor about being monitored and his thoughts, and he just basically turned around and said, look, you know, you're 34 with your first breast cancer, you will get breast cancer again. So I couldn't really risk that. That was a bit too scary for me. So that's why I'm going through this surgery. Then I will have to think about my oophorectomy and getting that done, so getting my ovaries out, because I don't really want ovarian cancer. I don't want ovarian cancer at all, not just a little bit. So I will be getting those taken out between the age of 40 and 45. Once that's done, then hopefully my risk of cancer will be greatly reduced, and I can just move on and live my life again, without the big C hanging over me like a dark cloud. So that's the reality of being BRCA1 positive. It's a sad truth that cancer is just always going to be a part of my life and a part of my family's life. But hopefully once we get our surgeries out the way, then we can move on a little bit. So if you have any questions, then please add them in the comments below. If you've liked this video, if you could like and subscribe and follow. And I will be doing a video about my risk reducing surgeries, so watch out for that one soon. Okay, thanks for watching.